Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the alien ships approach. His hands were steady on the control panel, but his heart was beating fast. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for. First contact with an alien race. "Captain, they're sending a message," said Communications Officer Pete Johnson. He pressed some buttons on his screen. "It's coming through now." The main screen flickered, and suddenly it could see inside an alien ship. The beings looked like living crystals that sparkled in the light. They wore thick metal suits that covered their entire bodies. Only their faces were visible through clear glass panels. "Greetings, unknown species," said the alien leader. His voice sounded like wind, chimes in a soft breeze. "I am Ambassador Vexther of the Zephyrian Empire. We welcome you to our star system." Jake stepped forward and smiled. "Thank you, Ambassador. I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing Earth and humanity. We're honored to meet you." Dr. Lisa Brown, the ship's expert on alien life, stood beside Jake. She had been studying the recordings of other alien races for years, but seeing real aliens was different. These Zephyrians looked beautiful but fragile, like expensive glass sculptures. "Your ship is impressive," Ambassador Vexter continued. "But we must ask, where are your protection suits? Our sensors show dangerous radiation levels near your vessel." Jake looked confused. "Protection suits? We don't need any special suits. Our ship is perfectly safe." The ambassador's crystal face seemed to change color, becoming slightly darker. "Surely you jest. No living being can survive in such conditions without proper armor." Lieutenant Ben Carter, the tactical officer, stepped up to a window and pointed outside. "Look, there's our maintenance crew working right now. They're fine." Outside the ship, Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez floated in space wearing only a standard work suit. She was fixing a plasma conduit with her bare hands. The energy from the conduit would have killed most aliens instantly, but Amy worked calmly, as if she was fixing a broken light bulb at home. The Zephyrians on the screen gasped. Several of them started speaking quickly in their own language, their voices rising in what sounded like panic. "That female is touching raw plasma energy," whispered one of the Zephyrian officers. "She should be dead." Ambassador Vexter leaned forward, his crystal eyes wide. "Captain Morrison, your crew member is in extreme danger. She must return to safety immediately." Jake laughed. "Amy? She's fine. She's done this repair 100 times before. Watch." Amy finished her work and gave a thumbs up to the ship. Then she kicked off from the hall and floated over to another section where mechanic Tony Silva was patching a small hole in the ship's outer wall. Tony was using a welding tool that created bright sparks and intense heat. "By the Great Crystal," gasped another Zephyrian. "They're both going to die. Why aren't they wearing protective armor?" Dr. Lisa Brown tried to explain. "Our people are naturally tough. We don't need heavy armor for basic maintenance work." The ambassador's color changed again, this time to a deep red. "Naturally tough? No species is naturally tough enough to survive. Plasma energy and fusion welding without protection. This is impossible." On the screen, more Zephyrian officers gathered around their ambassador. They were all talking at once, their crystal bodies flashing different colors. Jake couldn't understand their language, but their body language showed fear and confusion. "Captain," Pete Johnson said quietly, "I think we might have a problem here." The ambassador turned back to face them. "Captain Morrison, we must speak plainly. Are your people perhaps not alive? Are you synthetic beings? Robots?" Jake blinked in surprise. "Robots? No, we're completely alive. Flesh and blood, just like any organic species." "Impossible," said the ambassador firmly. "Flesh and blood cannot survive what we have witnessed. You must be lying to us, or—" He paused, his crystal face growing even darker. "Or you are a species that does not value life. A suicide race." Dr. Brown stepped forward. "Ambassador, I assure you, we value life very much. Humans are just built to handle harsh conditions. Our planet Earth is a challenging world, so we evolved to be strong." The Zephyrian officers were now backing away from their ambassador, as if they were afraid. One of them was pressing buttons frantically on a control panel. "Ambassador," the officer called out, "I'm reading the composition of their homeworld. The gravity is 3 times stronger than most inhabited planets. The radiation levels would kill us in minutes. The atmospheric pressure would crush our bodies. And they claim to live there naturally." Ambassador Vexter stared at the human crew with what looked like horror. "You come from a death world." "Death world?" Jake asked. "Earth isn't a death world. It's our home. Sure, it can be dangerous sometimes, but that's normal." "Normal?" The ambassador's voice cracked like breaking glass. "Captain, your normal world would exterminate our entire species in moments, and you claim to live there without protection." The communication screen started flickering. In the background, Jake could hear alarms going off on the Zephyrian ship. "Ambassador, what's happening?" Dr. Brown asked. "We are implementing emergency protocols," the ambassador replied, his voice shaking. "We must protect ourselves from your kind." "Protect yourselves? From us?" Jake felt confused and worried. "We came here in peace. We just want to be friends." "Friends?" Ambassador Vexter stood up, his crystal body now glowing bright red. "You are either the most dangerous species in the galaxy, or you are all insane. No sane being would expose themselves to such deadly conditions." On the human ship, warning lights started flashing. Lieutenant Carter checked his instruments. "Captain, they're powering up weapon systems. Multiple Zephyrian ships are moving to surround us." Jake raised his hands peacefully. "Ambassador, please. There's been a misunderstanding. We're not dangerous. We're just different from you." "Different?" The ambassador's voice was getting higher. "Captain, one of your crew members just survived direct contact with plasma energy. Another is welding metal in the vacuum of space with minimal protection. This is not different. This is impossible. You are either lying about being organic, or you are a species that feels no pain and fears no death." Amy Rodriguez floated back into view outside the window. She waved cheerfully at the alien ships, not knowing that they considered her a walking impossibility. "Look at her," whispered a Zephyrian officer. "She shows no fear, no concern for her safety. They truly must be a suicide species." The communication channel filled with rapid Zephyrian speech. Jake could hear the word quarantine being repeated in several different alien voices. Ambassador Vexter turned back to the humans, his crystal face now pale blue. "Captain Morrison, by the authority of the Zephyrian Empire, and for the safety of all known life, I am declaring an emergency quarantine on your species. You will not be allowed to leave this system until we understand what you are and why you do not fear death." The screen went black. Jake stared at the empty screen, then looked at his crew. Dr. Brown was frowning. Pete Johnson was shaking his head, and Lieutenant Carter was watching the alien ships that now surrounded them. "Well," Jake said finally, "that didn't go as planned." Outside, Amy Rodriguez finished her repairs and headed back to the airlock, completely unaware that she had just been classified as a member of the most terrifying species the galaxy had ever encountered. Dr. Kevin Walsh walked into the medical bay with a data pad in his hand. He had been Earth's best doctor before joining the space mission, but now he faced his strangest challenge yet. He needed to prove to aliens that humans could actually die. "This is crazy," he muttered to himself, reading the reports from the bridge. The Zephyrians thought humans were either robots or a suicidal species, because they survived things that would kill other aliens instantly. Amy Rodriguez sat on the medical table, still wearing her work clothes. She had just finished the repairs. Outside the ship, Ken didn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. "Doc, I feel fine," Amy said. "Why do I need a medical check?" Dr. Walsh smiled. "The aliens are worried about you, Amy. They think you should be dead after working with that plasma conduit." Amy laughed. "Dead? From a little plasma? I've been doing electrical work since I was 16. My dad taught me. He always said the trick is knowing which wires will kill you and which ones will just sting a bit." "That's exactly the problem," Dr. Walsh said. He activated his scanner and ran it over Amy's hands. What stings you a bit would kill a Zephyrian. In seconds, the scanner beeped, showing Amy's vital signs. Her heart rate was normal, her blood pressure was fine, and her skin showed only minor burns on her fingertips. "See? I told you I was okay," Amy said, looking at the tiny red marks on her fingers. "These will be gone by tomorrow." Dr. Walsh saved the scan results. He had an idea, but he wasn't sure it would work. "Amy, I need you to help me with something. We need to show the aliens that humans can get hurt." Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison was having his own problems. The Zephyrian ships had formed a circle around the New Horizon. Every few minutes, Ambassador Vexter called to ask more questions about human biology. "Captain," Pete Johnson said, "the ambassador is calling again." Jake sighed. "Put him through?" Ambassador Vexter appeared on the screen, but this time he wasn't alone. Several other Zephyrians stood behind him, all wearing even thicker armor than before. "Captain Morrison," the ambassador said, "we have been discussing your species with our scientists. They have some questions." A new Zephyrian stepped forward. This one's armor was covered in symbols and lights. "I am Chief Scientist Zorith. Captain, our records show that your species consumes poison for pleasure." Jake looked confused. "Poison? We don't eat poison. Our analysis of your food supplies shows dangerous chemicals. Capsaicin, alcohol, caffeine. These substances would kill most known species, yet you consume them daily." Dr. Lisa Brown joined Jake at the communication screen. "Those aren't poisons to us. Capsaicin is just spicy food. Alcohol is a mild intoxicant. Caffeine gives us energy. The scientist's crystal body flashed red. Mild intoxicant? Captain, alcohol would shut down our nervous systems permanently. And you claim it only makes you feel good? Well, too much alcohol can make us sick, Dr. Brown admitted. But in small amounts, it's harmless." All the Zephyrians on screen started talking at once. Their crystal bodies flashed different colors rapidly. "Sick but not dead?" Chief Scientist Zorith asked. "You consume a deadly poison, become ill, and then recover? By choice?" Jake was starting to understand the problem. "Everything that's normal to us seems impossible to you." "Not impossible," Ambassador Vexter said. "Insane." The communication was interrupted by an alarm on the human ship. Lieutenant Ben Carter checked his instruments. "Captain, we have Zephyrian security forces approaching. They're requesting permission to board." Jake frowned. "Ambassador, why do you want to board our ship?" "For everyone's safety," the ambassador replied. "We believe your species may be suffering from a galaxy-wide plague that removes your sense of self-preservation. We want to help you before you hurt yourselves." "We don't need help," Jake said firmly. "We're perfectly fine." But it was too late. The Zephyrian security team had already docked with the New Horizon. Jake could hear them moving through the ship's corridors. Their heavy armor made loud clanking sounds with each step. Security Chief Maria Santos ran onto the bridge. "Captain, we have armored aliens in the hallway. They're carrying what looked like medical equipment." "Medical equipment?" Dr. Brown asked. I think they're trying to sedate us, Maria said. They keep pointing devices at us and looking confused. When we don't fall over. Through the ship's internal cameras, Jake could see the Zephyrian security team moving carefully down the corridor. They were all wearing extra thick armor and carrying glowing devices that looked like weapons. One of the Zephyrians tried to use his device on mechanic Tony Silva, who was walking to the cafeteria. A blue beam hit Tony, who stopped and looked around. Hey, who's playing with the lights? Tony called out. The beam was supposed to be a powerful, stunning weapon, but Tony just seemed slightly annoyed by it. The Zephyrian security officer tried his weapon again, this time on maximum power. Tony staggered a bit, but didn't fall down. Okay, that's getting annoying, Tony said. He walked over to the Zephyrian and gently took the weapon away. You shouldn't point these things at people. The Zephyrian officer fell backward in shock. His weapon was designed to stop a charging battle beast, but the human had barely noticed it. On the bridge, Ambassador Vexter was watching through his own cameras. His crystal face had turned completely white. Impossible, he whispered. That was enough energy to stop a hive warrior. The human should be unconscious. Maybe your weapons don't work on humans, Jake suggested. Our weapons work on everything, Chief Scientist Zorith said. Energy weapons, sonic disruptors, neural scramblers. They affect all known nervous systems. Dr. Walsh's voice came over the ship's communication system. Captain, could you come to the medical bay? I want to show our guests something. Jake and Dr. Brown hurried to the medical bay, followed by two Zephyrian officers who were trying to understand what they had seen. In the medical bay, Dr. Walsh had set up a demonstration. Amy Rodriguez was sitting on the table next to several medical instruments. Gentlemen, Dr. Walsh said to the Zephyrians, I want to prove that humans can be hurt. Amy, could you show them your hands? Amy held up her hands, showing the small burns from the plasma conduit. The Zephyrians moved closer, their scanners beeping rapidly. These are injuries? One of the officers asked. They're so small. For us, yes, Dr. Walsh said. He picked up a small medical scanner and ran it over. Amy's burns. This plasma energy damaged her skin cells. In a few days, the damaged skin will fall off and new skin will grow back. The Zephyrians looked at each other, their crystal bodies flashing colors rapidly. New skin grows back? The officer asked. You can regenerate damaged tissue? Of course, Dr. Walsh said. All humans heal from minor injuries. Watch. He took a small medical blade and made a tiny cut on his own finger. A drop of blood appeared. Both Zephyrian officers immediately backed away, their armor's warning systems activating. You're bleeding, one of them shouted. You need immediate medical attention. Dr. Walsh looked at the tiny cut. This will stop bleeding in a few minutes and be completely healed in a couple of days. A couple of days? The Zephyrian officer's voice was shaking. You can survive blood loss for days? It's just a tiny cut, Amy said. Look, it's already stopping. She was right. The bleeding had already slowed to almost nothing. The Zephyrian officers were backing toward the door. One of them was speaking rapidly into his communication device in his own language. Ambassador Vexter's voice came over the ship's speakers. Dr. Walsh, did you just intentionally injure yourself to prove a point? It's just a small demonstration, Dr. Walsh replied. You deliberately caused yourself to bleed, and you are not concerned about dying? Dr. Walsh looked at his finger. The cut was barely visible now. Ambassador, if this tiny cut could kill me, humans would have gone extinct millions of years ago. There was a long silence from the ambassador. Then he spoke again, his voice very quiet. Captain Morrison, we need to have a very serious discussion about your species. Far across the galaxy, in the golden halls of the Hive Collective, drone scholar Kleith watched the recordings with growing amazement. Her compound eyes reflected the light from dozens of screens showing human activities. This cannot be real. She clicked to her assistant drones. Show me the data again. The recordings played once more. Humans working in space without thick armor. Humans touching energy that would melt her exoskeleton instantly. Humans healing from wounds that would kill her in minutes. Clythe's insect body shivered. The Hive Collective had survived for millions of years by being careful, by protecting themselves, by never taking unnecessary risks. These humans seemed to do the opposite of everything she understood about survival. Analyze their body structure, she ordered her drones. The biological scans appeared on her screens. Human bones were dense but flexible. Their skin was thick, compared to most species, but had no natural armor. Their muscles were strong, but not the strongest in the galaxy. Nothing about their bodies explained how they could survive such dangerous conditions. Perhaps, Clyde thought out loud, they come from a world so dangerous that normal safety precautions are not enough. She pulled up the data about Earth. What she saw made her antennae twitch with fear. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was full of reactive gases. Radiation from their sun would burn her shell in minutes. Storms that could destroy buildings. Earthquakes that could crack continents. No wonder they seem fearless, she whispered. They come from a nightmare world. Meanwhile, in another part of the galaxy, Captain Helen Ross was having her own encounter with the strange toughness of humans. Her mining ship, Iron Giant, had received a distress call from a mollusk freighter that was stuck in a radiation storm. Captain, said her pilot Susan Lee, the radiation levels are off the charts. No ship should go into that storm. Helen looked at her screens. The mollusk ship was sending desperate messages. Their crew was dying from radiation poisoning, and their engines were failing. How long do we have? Helen asked her engineer, Rick Palmer. Rick checked his instruments. In that radiation field? Most species would be dead in 10 minutes. We might last 30 minutes with our basic shielding. That's enough time to get them out, Helen decided. Susan, take us in. The Iron Giant flew into the radiation storm. The ship's hull began to glow from the intense energy. On any other ship, the crew would be dying already. Rick worked calmly at his station, monitoring the ship's systems. The radiation was making his skin tingle, like a mild sunburn. But he had experienced worse working in the engine rooms of fusion plants back on Earth. Susan piloted the ship through the storm, squinting slightly as the radiation made her eyes. Water. It felt like staring at bright snow on a sunny day. Annoying, but not dangerous. They reached the mollusk freighter and saw the alien crew through the windows. The mollusks looked like giant octopi with translucent skin. Through their clear bodies, Helen could see that their internal organs were shutting down from radiation damage. Rick, how fast can you get them aboard? Helen asked. Give me 5 minutes, Rick said. He put on a basic radiation suit and went outside to connect the rescue tube between the ships. The mollusk captain, a being called Gloob, watched through his ship's cameras as the human engineer worked in the radiation storm. The energy levels that were killing his crew seemed to barely affect the human. How is this possible? Gloob bubbled to his crew. The radiation should be cooking his flesh. Rick finished connecting the rescue tube and waved to the mollusk ship. All set, Captain. Bring them over. The mollusk crew moved through the tube as quickly as their weak bodies could manage. As soon as they were aboard the Iron Giant, Dr. Walsh's training kicked in. Helen had studied basic alien first aid before her mission. Get them to the medical bay, she ordered. Susan, get us out of here. The Iron Giant flew out of the radiation storm with its rescued cargo. The mollusk crew recovered quickly once they were away from the deadly radiation. Captain Gloob approached. Helen with reverence. Captain Ross, You and your crew have saved us from certain death. But how did you survive in the radiation storm? Helen shrugged. We're pretty tough. The radiation wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't going to kill us any time. Soon. Not pleasant? Gloob's tentacles waved in amazement. That radiation would have dissolved our bodies in minutes. You speak of it like bad weather. The news of the human rescue spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. The mollusk species began telling everyone about the immortal flesh beings who had saved them from the radiation storm. Back in Zephyrian space, Ambassador Vexter was receiving reports from across the galaxy. Every species that had encountered humans reported the same impossible things. Humans surviving in conditions that should kill them. Humans healing from injuries that should be fatal. Humans showing no fear of dangers that terrified other species. Ambassador, Chief Scientist Zorith said, I have analyzed the reports from 47 different species. They all say the same thing. Humans are either immortal or insane. Vexter looked at the data scrolling across his screens. Human miners working in asteroid fields that would crush other species. Human explorers walking on planets where the atmosphere would poison most life forms. Human rescue workers entering burning buildings to save people. Look at this report from the Gaseous Confederation, Zorith continued. Humans helped repair their floating cities during a methane storm. The Confederation beings had to wear full environmental suits. The humans worked in simple masks. Another report showed humans helping the silicon-based rockling species repair their underground cities after an earthquake. The rocklings, who were made of living stone, were amazed that soft flesh beings could work in the crushing depths of their world. Every species describes the same thing, Dexter said slowly. Humans doing impossible things and acting like they're normal. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the great meeting hall, their various life support systems creating a symphony of hums, bubbles, and mechanical sounds. Chancellor Blickstar, a floating jellyfish-like being, addressed the assembly. Fellow representatives, we face an unprecedented situation. A new species has entered our galaxy, and their capabilities challenge everything we understand about biology. The giant screen in the center of the hall showed footage of humans working in various dangerous environments. The assembled aliens watched in silence, their various forms of expression showing amazement, fear, and confusion. The question before us, Chancellor Blickstar continued, is whether these humans are a blessing or a threat to galactic peace. Representative Vashti of the Crystalline Union stood up. If they can survive anything, they cannot be stopped. They could be the most dangerous conquerors in history, or the most valuable allies, countered Representative Mordun of the Metal Collective. Think of the disasters they could help us survive, the places they could explore for us. In the back of the hall, a small furry being raised a tentacle. What if they're not trying to be dangerous? What if they just don't know how fragile the rest of us are? This comment caused a stir throughout the assembly. Many species began talking at once, their various languages creating a cacophony of sound. Chancellor Blickstar restored order. The Fuzzy Federation raises an interesting point. Perhaps the humans are not aware of their own unusual nature. Back on the New Horizon, Captain Jake Morrison was learning just how right the Fuzzy Federation representative was. Dr. Lisa Brown had been analyzing the communications from various alien species, and she was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. Jake, she said, calling him to her laboratory, I think I know what's happening. We're not just tough by human standards. We're incredibly tough by galactic standards. She showed him a comparison chart on her screen. Look at this. The average galactic species can survive in a temperature range of about 20 degrees. We can handle over 100 degrees of variation. Most species die if their atmosphere changes by more than 5%. We can survive in atmospheres That would poison most life forms. Jake studied the chart. So we're not normal? By galactic standards, we're practically indestructible, Lisa said. No wonder they think we're either robots or crazy. To them, we might as well be made of steel. Communications Officer Pete Johnson's voice came over the intercom. Captain, we're receiving a message from the Galactic Council. They want to talk. To you, Jake sighed. I have a feeling this conversation is going to be very interesting. Dr. Lisa Brown stood in the specially built testing chamber aboard the Zephyrian Research Station. The room was filled with alien scientists from dozens of species, all wearing their protective suits and armor. She wore only her standard uniform. Are you certain about this experiment? Asked Zephyrian scientist Prime Velana. Her crystal body was flashing nervous colors. The radiation levels we are planning to use would kill most beings instantly. Lisa nodded calmly. That's the point. We need to show you that humans can be hurt, just not as easily as you expect. The testing chamber had been designed to prove human vulnerability. The alien scientists had worked for days to create conditions that would be dangerous to humans, but not immediately fatal. It was harder than they expected. Marine Sergeant Alex Murphy volunteered to be the first test subject. He was a big man, with scars from training accidents back on Earth. The alien scientists looked at his scars with amazement. You have survived multiple injuries, observed Dr. Kethra, an insect-like scientist from the Hive Collective. These marks on your skin show healed damage. Alex looked down at a scar on his arm from a training exercise years ago. This? I fell off a climbing wall and cut myself on a rock. Needed 12 stitches. All the alien scientists stepped backward. 12 stitches? Dr. Kethra's compound eyes went wide. You were cut deeply enough to require medical repair, and you survived? Well, yeah, Alex said. It hurt pretty bad, but I was back to training in a couple weeks. Scientist Prime Velana made notes on her crystalline datapad. Subject claims to have survived major tissue damage and returned to dangerous activities. Shortly afterward, either lying or demonstrating impossible recovery rates. The first test was heat tolerance. The chamber temperature was raised to levels that would cook most galactic species. Alex started sweating, but remained conscious and alert. Temperature now at 45 degrees Celsius, announced the testing computer. All known biological. Species except lavavorms should be experiencing system shutdown. Alex wiped sweat from his forehead. It's getting pretty warm in here. Feels like summer in Arizona. The alien scientists looked at their instruments in disbelief. The temperature that should have killed the human was merely uncomfortable to him. Increased to 50 degrees. Scientist Prime Velana ordered. Alex started breathing harder, but remained standing. Okay, now it's really hot, like working in an engine room. At 55 degrees, Alex finally asked to stop. I'm starting to feel dizzy. Maybe we should call it here. The alien scientists were amazed. He had lasted in temperatures that would have killed them all, and he stopped before reaching truly dangerous levels for himself. Next was the radiation test. Civilian consultant Mary Clark took Alex's place in the chamber. She was a small woman who had worked as a nuclear engineer on Earth. Beginning radiation exposure, the computer announced. Levels now approaching danger threshold for most carbon-based. Life. Mary stood calmly in the chamber, reading a book she had brought with her. The radiation that was killing the test plants around her seemed to have no effect. Radiation now at levels that would sterilize most planets. The computer continued. Mary looked up from her book. How much longer? I want to finish this chapter. Doctor. Ziloth, a gas being from the Nebula Consortium, floated closer to his instruments. Impossible. She should be experiencing cellular breakdown. Instead, her vital signs are completely normal. Oh, I feel a little tingly, Mary admitted, like I've been in the sun too long. but I've worked around radiation my whole career. This is actually pretty mild compared to some of the reactor maintenance I've done. The tests continued for hours. The humans were exposed to toxic gases that would melt most alien respiratory systems. They breathed it and coughed, complaining that it smelled bad, but showing no serious effects. They were subjected to sound waves that would shatter crystalline beings. The humans covered their ears and asked if the noise could be turned down, but they remained conscious and coherent. The breaking point came during the toxin resistance test. Engineer Frank Davis had volunteered for this one. The plan was to expose him to a Zephyrian crystal formation that produced what the aliens considered extremely deadly poison. This crystal secretes a compound that would kill most beings if they even stood near it, Scientist Prime Velana explained. We want to see how quickly it affects human biology. Frank approached the crystal formation, wearing only basic protective gloves. The crystal was beautiful, glowing with internal light, but the air around it shimmered with toxic vapor. It's actually kind of pretty, Frank said, getting closer to examine the crystal structure. The alien scientists watched their instruments in horror as Frank breathed air that should have killed him in seconds. Toxin levels now at 50 times the lethal dose for most species, Dr. Kethra reported. The human shows no signs of distress. Frank reached out to touch the crystal, curious about its texture. The moment his gloved hand made contact, the crystal pulsed with brighter light. Frank, don't touch it directly. Dr. Lisa Brown called through the intercom. But it was too late. Frank had already pulled off his glove to feel the crystal surface. It's warm, he said, pressing his bare palm against the glowing formation. And it's got an interesting texture, like rough glass. Every alien in the observation chamber started shouting at once. Their various life support systems began beeping warnings as they panicked. He's touching it directly. Scientist Prime Velana's crystal body flashed bright red. The toxin will enter through his skin. He'll be dead in moments. But Frank just stood there, examining the crystal with scientific curiosity. Lisa, come look at this. I think this crystal might be alive. It's warm, and I can feel it pulsing like a heartbeat. Frank, step away from the crystal, Dr. Brown ordered. The aliens say it's extremely toxic. Frank shrugged and stepped back, but kept his hand near the formation. If it's toxic, it's not very good at it. I feel fine. The aliens stared at their instruments in disbelief. Not only had Frank survived direct contact with their most dangerous biological weapon, but his body was actually processing the toxin and neutralizing it. His immune system is adapting, Dr. Ziloth reported in amazement. He's developing antibodies in real time. The toxin that should have killed him is actually making his immune system stronger. Dr. Kevin Walsh, who had been monitoring from the human ship, smiled as he read the medical data. That's normal for humans. We've been exposed to toxins and diseases our whole evolutionary history. Our immune systems are designed to adapt and overcome. Frank held up his hand and looked at where he had touched the crystal. There was a small red mark like a mild rash. Look at that, he said to the camera. It did affect me a little. It's like when I'm allergic to certain metals. It'll be gone by tomorrow. The alien scientists stood in stunned silence. Their most deadly biological weapon had given the human something equivalent to a mosquito bite. Ambassador Vexther's voice came through the communication system. Dr. Brown, we need to discuss your species immediately. I know, Dr. Brown replied. We're starting to understand the problem. Scientist Prime Velana approached the communication console. Dr. Brown, in 3 hours of testing, we have exposed your people to conditions that would exterminate most known life forms. They have responded to our most extreme survival tests, as if they were minor inconveniences. We tried to show you that humans can be hurt, Dr. Brown admitted. But I'm realizing that what we consider harmful and what you consider harmful are very different things. Dr. Walsh joined the conversation from the medical bay. Ambassador, I've been studying the data from our tests. I think I understand what's happening here. Humans evolved on what you would call a death world. Death world? Ambassador Vexther asked. Earth is an extremely dangerous planet by galactic standards, Dr. Walsh explained. Our gravity is crushing. Our sun bombards us with radiation. Our weather includes storms that can level cities. Our planet has earthquakes, volcanoes, and deadly creatures. He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's environment compared to other inhabited worlds. Most species evolved on stable, safe worlds. You developed intelligence and technology because you didn't need to spend all your energy just surviving. Humans had to become tough just to stay alive. Scientist Prime Velana studied the data. Your atmospheric pressure alone would crush most of our species. And you claim this is normal? To us, yes, Dr. Walsh said. But we're starting to understand that normal for humans is impossible for most other species. Frank Davis walked out of the testing chamber, still examining the small rash on his hand. Doc, this is kind of itchy. Got any cream for it? Dr. Walsh looked at the rash and smiled. It's just contact dermatitis, Frank. Like touching poison ivy. It'll heal on its own. The alien scientists heard this and their various forms of expression. Showed shock. Poison ivy? Dr. Kethra asked. You have named plants after poison, suggesting they are common? Oh yeah, Frank said casually. Earth has lots of poisonous plants. And animals. And insects. You learn to watch out for them when you're a kid. Your children are exposed to deadly organisms? Scientist Prime Velana's crystal body flashed bright orange. This is considered normal child rearing? The solar flare hit the Zephyrian system like a wave of deadly fire. Energy levels that would cook most living beings in seconds filled the space around the orbital stations. Inside those stations, millions of Zephyrians huddled in their deepest shelters, knowing that their rescue ships could not reach them through the radiation storm dot, but flying through that same deadly storm, human ships moved like they were sailing through calm water dot construction. Chief Sam Turner stood on the deck of his rescue shuttle, watching the energy storm rage around them. The radiation made his skin tingle and his eyes water slightly, but he had worked in worse conditions during reactor repairs back on Earth. Turner to base, he called into his radio. We're approaching Orbital Station 7. Radiation levels are high, but manageable. Beginning docking procedures. On the human command ship, Captain Jake Morrison monitored the rescue operation with pride and worry. His people were doing something that every other species in the galaxy considered impossible. Captain, Communications Officer Pete Johnson, reported, We're getting messages from all over the galaxy. Everyone's watching this rescue operation. Through his screens, Jake could see human rescue teams working throughout the Zephyrian orbital network. Rescue specialist Nancy Wright led a team evacuating the research stations. Engineer Rick Palmer guided families of Zephyrian civilians to safety. Each human worker moved calmly through radiation that would kill most galactic species instantly. Inside Orbital Station 7, the Zephyrian families waited in their emergency shelters. Their crystal bodies were dim with fear. They had given up hope when the solar flare made normal rescue impossible. Then they heard heavy footsteps in the corridor. Outside, the footsteps of beings who could walk through radiation storms without fear. Sam Turner knocked on the shelter door. Hello in there. This is Human Rescue Team Alpha. We're here to get you out. The shelter door opened, revealing a family of Zephyrians wearing their thickest emergency armor. They stared at Sam, who wore only a basic radiation suit and work clothes. You came for us? Asked the family's elder, his crystal voice shaking with emotion. Through the death storm? Of course we came, Sam said with a smile. No one gets left behind. That's the human way. The evacuation took 6 hours. Human rescue teams moved through the radiation storm like it was a minor inconvenience, carrying Zephyrian families to safety. The aliens watched in amazement as their rescuers worked calmly in conditions that should have killed them. Nancy Wright carried a small Zephyrian child to safety, the little crystal being glowing with wonder rather than fear. A scary light. Doesn't hurt you? The child asked. It's not scary when you're used to it, Nancy replied gently. Where I come from, we deal with dangerous things all the time. The trick is knowing how to be safe without being afraid. Dr. Kevin Walsh worked in the medical stations, treating Zephyrians who had been injured during the emergency. His human immune system allowed him to work in areas that would poison alien medical staff. Doctor, asked a Zephyrian medic, how can you function in these radiation levels without protective equipment? Dr. Walsh looked down at his simple medical scrubs. This is protective equipment for us. We don't need the heavy armor that you do. By the end of the rescue operation, every Zephyrian on the orbital stations had been saved. Not a single life was lost, and the human rescue teams had worked through conditions that would have made the evacuation impossible for any other species. Ambassador Vexther stood in the command center of the rescue coordination ship, watching the final shuttle loads of his people arrive safely. His crystal body glowed with warm, grateful light. Captain Morrison, he said, his voice full of emotion, your people have done the impossible. You have saved millions of lives in conditions that should have killed you all. Jake smiled tiredly. We did what anyone would do. No, Ambassador Vexther said firmly. What your people did today, no other species in the galaxy could have accomplished. You walked through death itself to save lives. The news of the rescue operation spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. Every species that heard the story reacted with the same amazement. Humans had entered a radiation storm that would sterilize planets and came out carrying survivors. On the Hive Collective homeworld, drone scholar Clythe presented her findings to the Hive. Queen, Your Majesty, the humans are not warriors or conquerors. They are rescuers. They use their incredible abilities to save others, not to destroy. The Queen's compound eyes reflected thoughtful light, a species of natural protectors. This is unexpected, but welcome news. In the gaseous clouds of the Nebula Consortium, the floating beings discussed the implications of human durability. If they can survive radiation storms, one being pulsed, they could explore regions of space that are deadly to us. They could be our eyes and hands in the dangerous places. The Metal Collective representatives calculated the practical applications. Humans could work in environments that would destroy our mechanical forms. They could perform maintenance and repairs that we cannot. But it was the Fuzzy Federation that understood the most important aspect of what had happened. Representative Pippin addressed the Emergency Galactic Council session with wisdom that surprised many larger species. Fellow representatives, Pippin squeaked, today we learned something important about humans. They are not dangerous because they want to hurt others. They are dangerous to danger itself. They fight the things that threaten life, not the living beings. Chancellor Blixtar floated in the center of the Great Hall, his jellyfish body pulsing with decision. The evidence is clear. Humanity has proven that their extraordinary abilities are matched by extraordinary compassion. The Galactic Council hereby extends an invitation to Earth to join our community. But not as junior members, added Representative Mordun. As specialists, the beings who can go where others cannot survive. Back in Zephyrian space, the rescued families gathered to thank their human rescuers. Children who had been afraid of the death beings now saw them as heroes who walked through fire to save lives. Young Zelara, the crystal child that Nancy Wright had carried to safety, approached the human rescue worker with a gift. It was a small crystal formation that glowed with internal light. "For you," Zelara said shyly. "So you remember that you saved us." Nancy knelt down to accept the gift. "Thank you, Zelara. But you don't need to give me anything. Helping people is just what we do." "Why?" the child asked. "Why do you help people who are different from you?" Nancy smiled, because different doesn't mean bad, and everyone deserves to be safe. Ambassador Vexter watched this exchange and finally understood what made humans special. It wasn't just their incredible durability. It was their willingness to use that durability to protect others. "Captain Morrison," he said, "I owe your species an apology. We thought you were dangerous because you seemed fearless. We didn't understand that your fearlessness comes from strength, and your strength is used to protect, not to harm." Jake nodded. "We're not fearless, Ambassador. We just have different things to fear. We fear letting people down. We fear not being strong enough to help when help is needed." The phrase that came out of the rescue operation spread throughout the galaxy. No natural armor needed. It became humanity's unofficial motto among the galactic community. Humans didn't need thick shells or metal suits or energy shields. Their soft, seemingly vulnerable bodies were tougher than the strongest armor most species could build. But more importantly, their hearts were strong enough to risk those tough bodies to save others. Captain Jake Morrison's final log entry from the mission became required reading in galactic diplomatic schools. "We came to the stars, thinking we were just another species looking for friends. We discovered that we're the species other people call when they need someone who can walk through fire to bring them home. It's not the role we expected, but it's one we're honored to fill. Earth's children will stand guard in the dangerous places so that all of our galactic family can live safely in the light." The Galactic Council created a new department, Emergency Response and Hazardous Environment Operations, with human specialists stationed throughout known space. When disasters struck, when conditions became too dangerous for normal rescue operations, the call went out to the beings who needed no natural armor, and the humans always answered. Ambassador Vexter visited Earth a year later and stood on a beach, watching human children play in the surf. The ocean waves that would crush his crystal body were just fun to the young humans. The solar radiation that would burn him in its gave them healthy color. "They really do come from a death world," he mused to Dr. Lisa Brown, who was showing him around. "To you, maybe," Dr. Brown replied. "To us, it's just home. Beautiful, challenging, sometimes dangerous home that taught us to be strong." A small human child ran up to them, sandy and laughing, completely unafraid of the towering crystal alien. "Are you a space person?" the child asked with delight. Ambassador Vexter knelt down carefully. "Yes, little one. I come from very far away." "That's so cool," the child exclaimed. "Do you want to build a sandcastle with us?" As Vexter watched the fearless child run back to play with friends, he understood the final piece of the human puzzle. They weren't born indestructible. They were born curious, compassionate, and BR.